Welcome back to the third segment of the Harry Thomas Show Week in Review. Today is January 26th, 2008. The website is harrythomas.info. I'm your host, Harry Thomas, and in the last segment we were talking about how the Fed keeps lowering interest rates, creating this huge bubble, and they're purposely trying to destroy the dollar. And this is why, because they want to bring in the North American monetary integration. Here comes the Amero. This came out of Global Research Tuesday, January 22nd, 2008. Many have now heard rumblings of the Amero, a proposed North American currency to replace the Canadian loonie, American dollar, and Mexican peso. However, most of the mentions of this concept, when discussed in mainstream media, tend to focus on suggesting that the talk of an Amero, and in effect the accompanying North American Union, is nothing but a conspiracy theory created by deluded xenophobes afraid of immigration and globalization. However, despite being conveyed as purely theoretical, a recent article in the national Canadian newspaper The Financial Post refers to the Amero not as a theoretical idea or conspiracy theory, but as a potential reality. The article, entitled "Fix the Loonie," lays out the process to be undertaken before the adoption of a continental currency known as the Amero. And this has been documented, and they want to continue to say, oh, it's not happening. And they keep telling you it's not happening, but they keep doing it behind the scenes. President Bush already signed agreements in Montebello.
I think one thing people who are dollar-based need to focus on is the Amero. That's the one thing that nobody's talking about, but I think it's going to have a big impact on everybody's life in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. If you Google it, you'll find out all about it. The Amero is the proposed new currency for the North American community, which is being developed right now between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico to make a borderless community, much like the EU, and the dollar, Canadian dollar, U.S. dollar, and the Mexican peso replaced by the Amero.
Now, see, there is an Amero. I don't see how anybody can deny it. I mean, Dr. Corsi has documented this very well. Says here, the North American Union becomes litmus test for political hypocrisy among U.S. Democratic presidential candidates. That critical issue is that the so-called Security and Prosperity Partnership of North American Union, the President George Bush administration's agenda, would literally undermine and subvert the kinds of values and related policy areas that Democratic presidential candidates have professed to support. The silence of the Democratic presidential candidates on the SPP-NAU demonstrates a complete lack of integrity and disingenuousness. The failure of the Democratic presidential candidates to confront the Bush administration's North American Union agenda demonstrates that these candidates' opposition to the Bush administration is merely political theater directed at a gullible American public. And this here exposes the left-right fraud, the false left-right paradigm. There is no Democrat. There is no Republican. These people are members of the CFR. They're pushing for world government, and they're just puppets on a string doing like a fake boxing match. Just like Bush and Kerry, who are Skull and Bones brothers, were doing in 2004. It's just posing and running propaganda. And that's all it is political propaganda. These people know. Edwards, Clinton, they're all members of the Bilderberg group. They know, okay? And I'm predicting right now it's going to be Clinton Edwards. She's going to take Edwards on as the vice president. Why? Because they both attended the Bilderberg meeting. And at the Bilderberg meeting, they decide who's president. They decide what kind of currency we're going to have in the future. They decide where we're going to go to war and how much money the military-industrial complex is going to make. And this is just an outrage. It says here, Americans who seek a better quality of life need to be guided by action and not simply political rhetoric. Silence as the action of the U.S. Democratic presidential candidates on the Bush administration's effort conveys a Democratic presidential strategy of cooperating in a political charade against the American people. The SPP-NAU agenda is an apparent effort to concentrate global power in an alliance with the big business elites of the neo-fascist European Union in a march toward the consolidation of an Orwellian-like New World Order, where the kinds of values fought by former champions of the Democratic Party like Robert Sargent, Shriver, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Robert F. Kennedy will be totally disregarded in favor of an agenda of exploitation and oppression under an unaccountable neo-fascist clique. And that's exactly what's going on. These are international bankers pulling the strings of these politicians, okay? It's time for people to wake up to this. They don't even talk about anything real on the TV. They're arguing about race, okay? Let's talk about our country dying. Let's talk about world government coming in. What about our sovereignty? What about our Bill of Rights and our Constitution? You guys are going to argue whether or not Martin Luther King needed help from whites in order to continue his agenda? He's been dead for 30 years. This is ridiculous. This is an outrage. And I've got a special report coming up on CIA documents pointing to the conclusion that the U.S. government did have Martin Luther King assassinated. So keep an eye out for that. Out of the ashes, a new world order. Global elite signaling declining superpower status of the United States, rise of the new world. As the United States faces an economic crisis and is being compared by experts to the 1929 Great Depression, the global elite are proclaiming the fall of the U.S. and the rise of a new global order. The IOL reports in recent meetings in Davos, Switzerland, which focused in part on a global economic meltdown, pointed to global solutions and the need for a strengthened United Nations in the face of world crisis. Sovereignty, according to many who attended, must be weakened. Okay? What gives the U.S. the right to claim a moral monopoly over the world anyway? Okay, the first use of nuclear weapons must remain in quiver of escalation as the ultimate instrument to prevent the use of weapons of mass destruction. This is what Western military leaders say. I read the statement 3 times trying to figure out the typo. Then it hit me. The West has now out-Orwelled Orwell. The West must nuke other countries in order to prevent the use of weapons of mass destruction. Can you believe that? This is what's going on. Thought crimes on a world level. The UN wants the final word on rearing your children. This came out of the American Free Press, and I think you ought to find out what's going on here and read this stuff and investigate yourself. Why is a world body telling us how to discipline and school our children? All right, this is an outrage. Globalists want a tax on television and video games. David Rockefeller, Maurice Strong, and the Earth Summit folks, including the United Nations Environmental Program, want to tax your television and video games, saying because it'll help get you out and away from the television and obesity. But these globalists don't care about obesity. This is just incredible. Canada removes Israel and U.S. from a torture list. You know, basically they said the Canadian government apologizes for saying the U.S. tortures. For some reason we thought waterboarding and being held naked with German shepherds snapping at your testicles was torture. We're sorry, we take it back. This is just an outrage. We need to stop this push for New World Order and world government and get the information out and save America. Thanks for listening.
Forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order. We're gonna rise an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders. We're gonna do the work our Lord puts before us. And there's a job that surely needs to get done. The job of waking up the nation to the new world order, which is trying to put us under their thumb.